September surprises. There are some tapes, maybe more out there. There's a lot of moving parts going on, so join us as we discuss all these important topics today.
Hey guys, and welcome to the Political Perch podcast, a bi-weekly podcast that talks about current events, politics, presidents, history, and anything that is plaguing the United States of America. Join us.
Hey guys, welcome to another Political Perch podcast. I'm your host, Ashton.
And I'm Andy.
And Andy, it's good to be with you. I'm a little energetic because the Rams won. So if you guys don't know, I'm a big Rams fan. Shameless plug. Listen to our sports podcast and hear about how much we get things wrong. Because especially with sports, it's very hard to judge correctly, especially this year. So let's move on. Politics. We're going to go through our standard 3 topics, and our first one is our new it's going to be weekly, or it's going to be on every podcast, and it's going to be our state of the race. We're going to we're not going to go over our full maps, but we're going to do kind of a consensus map between us two. We'll talk about it, talk about certain stats, certain polling things. Andy, you want to kick that off?
Yes, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, you will probably see this map on your screen. If not, we'll try to explain it to you the best we can. But if you look, this is going to be our consensus map. So it is not going to be what we each think of each state. It's more of kind of if we were coming together and kind of compromising on what states we're going to be, this is what we would have. Right now, our consensus map would be Biden at 320 and Donald Trump at 169, with 49 electoral votes being toss-up either way. You can see North Carolina, Ohio, and Georgia are the 3 states we kind of are debating about ourselves. We don't know which way they're going to go. They're super close. Other states like Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, all those are we have either going to Biden or Donald Trump. So, Ashton, I think the first state we kind of should just dive into, we're just going to talk about why we think they are the way that they are. Let's just do Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Let me first put the little disclaimer here. This does not mean we think all the states on this map, red or blue, are going to go heavily for either candidate. This means just me and Andy both agree at this time, if the election was held today, that person would win it either by 1 vote or a million. So going into Ohio, I think Andy had that one going Biden. I had that one going Trump. This is a state that's incredibly hard for me to call. It's similar to Iowa, but a little bit more to the left of Iowa, in my opinion. It's definitely a state where if the national polls are between 6 and 9, it's kind of a pure toss-up in my mind. And I just, by nature, will give Trump the kind of benefit of the doubt when it's a scenario like that, since he's the incumbent. Andy, why do you disagree with me on that point of view?
I think for the longest time, you can go back through my maps, through our predictions, through even probably back in our podcast, I had Ohio going to Donald Trump. Lately, though, it seems like everything Donald Trump has been doing for his campaign has been the opposite of what he needs to do for Ohio. We have the Goodyear boycott that it might have just been a joke, might have been just something he says because he says a lot of stuff, but that does affect people's lives. Those are a lot of jobs in Ohio that have manufacturing jobs, especially in the automobile, and Goodyear is in Ohio. We established that. On top of that, John Kasich, a former very, very popular former governor of the state, former presidential candidate who won it by a huge margin back in 2016, came out to the DNC and supported Donald Trump.
Oh, Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, thank you. But this is all things that are going to hurt Donald Trump in the election. It's going to be a close state. I still think there's a ton of supporters for Donald Trump there.
Mm-hmm.
But we're more looking at these undecided independent voters, because both of these sides are going to win their fan bases. We're not trying to, either side's not going to really pull from the other. Very few will do that. If you look at the undecided independents, I think they're favoring Joe Biden right now, just because everything that Trump has done.
No, I think that's a good point, and I've had, as you know, Joe Biden winning Ohio in many of my maps, and to me, it's just right now. It's only because Joe Biden had a slight dip a few weeks ago that I'm kind of shaky on Ohio as a whole, and somewhat Wisconsin a little bit. So,
Yeah, this might definitely change because Donald Trump has been gaining some ground as of late. I think that has to do with the economy slowly going up, with the coronavirus kind of slowly declining. It's going to help Trump a little bit in the polls, but I still think Ohio goes Biden right now. But let's move on to our southeastern friends in Georgia, a very
mm,
very complicated state to because of you have the suburbs areas and you have the big metropolis of Atlanta. That's a huge portion of the voters, but then it's a bunch of farmers, bunch of rural Americans. So it's a very interesting state and a big state when it comes to electoral votes. 16 is nothing to be ashamed of. So
mhm.
Ashton, I can't exact. I think you picked Biden to win this state, and I
Yes.
picked Trump. So a flip flop from Ohio. Why do you think Biden secures Georgia?
I feel like this election will be kind of a part of that realignment I've been talking about. The electoral college in the country goes through realignment. It's slow and it's meticulous, and it takes a few states for you to see a new map in the electoral college. And I really think educated college white voters, or you can say college women or women in general, or the suburb moms, those voters are trending towards Biden, and they are concentrated in certain states like Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, in Arizona. And I feel like the same thing that happens in Arizona is going to start happening in Georgia to a lesser effect, but I think it will. And I feel like the undecideds and the suburban voters going to come out in such a high amount that Trump's turnout himself won't be able to match. And I think Joe Biden is going to get a narrow victory. I do think it's going to be incredibly close. And at least right now, if the lead goes down to a 5 point lead, then I would not have Georgia going to Biden. But anything above a 6 point lead, I feel like Georgia is a pure toss up, and I would give Biden the slight lead just because if you're leading by 7 points, the chances are going into election day, if you're leading by 7 points, you're going to win undecideds and late breakers. And if that happens, then game is probably over in certain states, especially competitive ones.
I do agree with you that Georgia's demographics are shifting. There will be within the next either this election, the next election, or the election two elections from now. Georgia will be a different state, a different ball game for candidates. Obama won Georgia. He won a lot of states. He was a
He
very,
didn't
very.
win
He
Georgia.
didn't win Georgia. I thought he did.
No,
He won South Carolina, right?
no, no. He won North Carolina. He won Florida. He won Indiana and
North
Missouri.
man, I could have swore he won Georgia, but
No.
it's shifting. It's close. They're becoming a lot more democratic, as the Atlanta population booms, as some other cities.
Stacey Abrams got within 2 points in her governor's race.
Between Georgia and North Carolina, I have more confidence in, honestly, Georgia going Trump than North Carolina. Wait, no, flip that. I have more confidence with North Carolina going with Trump, and because North Carolina is a very interesting state, but these are states that could go either way. There really are a pure toss up, even more so, I think, than Ohio. But I
Mm-hmm.
just see both those states, North Carolina and Georgia, just be too favorable of Trump at the moment. Especially now, even if, I think with the economy starting to come back, people are going back to work, and it's the virus isn't gone. Obviously, it's not gone, but with it not being as big as it was back 3 4 months ago, these voters are gonna, I think, can flip back to these states, and both these states have been relatively. I'm not going to say they haven't been affected by it, but been relatively unaffected by these protests in the state. I
Mm-hmm.
know Atlanta's had some protests, Charlotte's had some protests, but nothing like we're seeing in Portland, nothing like we're seeing in Minnesota, nothing like we're seeing in New York, Los Angeles, stuff like this. I think that helps Trump, and I think he pulls out a narrow victory in both those states.
I will make a quick comment about North Carolina. I think it's interesting, not just the Biden versus Trump polls in North Carolina, but the Senate polls in North Carolina. And I always try to say you look at Senate polls to give an indication of a high watermark for like a certain candidate. Like if a Senate candidate, Democrat in North Carolina, is leading by 8 points, then that gives a mark, or if he's up to, let's say, 48 and he's 8 points ahead of the Republican in North Carolina, that tells you Biden can get up to 48 with voters if he wins over those voters already deciding to vote for the Democrat in the Senate. So you got to keep an eye on those polls. I feel like North Carolina is a similar state as Georgia, and I just think the late deciders are going to go with the person who wins the popular vote. Not on purpose, but I'm saying most time a coincidence is that they do.
Yeah, we have this map still, even if these states all turn to
Red, yeah,
red, it's
Trump.
still going to be a Biden victory for the most part. Like if I will do the
A
map.
solid
I will change the
victory.
map here too. Let's do all those toss ups. Um, let's give them to Trump. Let's see how it turns out. I'm doing this, on my computer right now. That's why you can't see it. But even if we give Georgia, North Carolina, and Ohio all to Donald Trump, he still loses by 120 electoral votes. It's just he's at that spot that it just doesn't look like he can feasibly win unless something really, really damaging happens to Biden. And we'll get to in a second that our stuff's actually happening to him again. But he wins. Let's just give it to Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio to him. And even if you give Florida to Trump, which is just not going to happen, we don't think, me and him,
Mm.
he still loses 291 to 247.
I will say one quick note on Florida, Andy. People need to understand this. This election day could become election week very easily, just with the amount of people saying that they will vote mail in. And one of the biggest states to look at on election night, if the race will be called on election night, is Florida. And what do I mean by that? Is Trump has a decently narrow path of victory. Biden has a wider path of victory. And what that means is on election night, if Biden wins by a margin in Florida that night, they will be more likely to make quicker calls because the path for Trump to win is a lot more narrow if he doesn't win Florida. And I don't think a Republican has won the presidency without Florida in 100 years, or it's something like that. And not to mention the early vote for Florida, people don't know this, but when you turn in your mail-in ballot, Florida already basically does everything besides open it up and count it. They double check your signature because when you sign in mail-in ballot, you have to sign the ballot and the outside. They double check that against the voter rolls and all that before the election. That's very rare for a state, and the mail-in ballots actually get counted faster than the actual votes on voting day. So that's why Florida can get called a lot quicker and earlier than other states. And if it's such a mass mail-in voting election and Biden ends up winning Florida in a decent margin and they call it at 1 o'clock in the morning, then you can expect other states probably to be called for Biden that they wouldn't if Trump wins Florida or it's tied. So I think people need to keep that in mind. This election could be an election week and it could be a long process if it's especially if it's close.
So we are 2 months away from the election, a little bit less than 2 months. It's September right now. It'll be September 15th when this podcast comes out. But you have to understand that the only way Donald Trump can win, the only way he can win is if it's another perfect storm like it was in 2016. I don't think he has the same conditions he does then. Hillary Clinton is not, and I mean, Joe Biden's not the same as Hillary Clinton. And it's going to be another. I just think Biden has enough prowess and enough charisma, even though it's not as much, to just hold off Trump. He's going to win. It might not be a blowout. It might be, but we do think Biden's going to win in November. Hey guys, Andy here. Just got to make a preface real quick before we move on to the podcast. This was filmed yesterday, September 14th, a day before another Trump tape was leaked. So go into this next segment with a grain of salt, knowing that we did not have the full story because everything now feels like it breaks instantly and every single day. So keep watching, keep listening as we go over the first leak and the first tapes, but no, there's more, and we will talk about that in a coming video. Let's move on, though. I suggested this just a little bit ago that more stuff is coming out about Donald Trump. Where we talked about the his comments about the military, if they're true or not. You can go look at our video on that one on our YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
We have different opinions on that. That's fine, but stuff has come out that is actually from him, his actual words that were leaked. The Bob Woodward tapes. Ashton, I'm gonna play them real quick for everyone who's listening, and then we'll talk about it. All right. Here we go, guys.
It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. The touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air. That's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is more deadly. This is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. So this is deadly stuff. Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes,
because I don't want to create a panic.
Obviously, these are Donald Trump's comments on the current COVID pandemic. He has said things like he wanted to play it down. It was a lot more deadly than he let on. Ashton, what are you thinking after these tapes have been released?
Well, Andy, I'm at least happy we don't have to have the debate about anonymous sources, because it literally came from his own mouth. And let's get out of the first thing. I think it's amazing the President of the United States happened to sit down with the reporter that broke the Nixon tapes to only have the same reporter record, I would say, one of the biggest tapes to come out this election, just because it's using his own words, and that can be devastating against a politician, especially an incumbent president. But initially from hearing it, it's just disappointing, because I'll remind you guys, both of those phone calls took place in February and March, when he was actively saying things counter to what was on those recordings. So he knew, and I think that's the shocking thing is, some people claimed he just didn't know, or he was inept, or a lot of different excuses, but he clearly knew. And just for anyone listening to this who says he didn't want to panic the country, there's a difference between not wanting to panic the country and telling people, this is going to be a hard time. We can get through this together, and you need to be prepared. It's like, those are two separate things. You didn't have Churchill in the middle of the London Blitz say, oh, Germans aren't coming. They're not coming. They're not going to try to kill us. They're not bad. No, he was honest with the British people. He said, there's going to be challenges ahead. It's going to be hard. We're going to fight, but I will give you my blood, sweat, and tears in the fight, and I will give you my best. And they got through it because of that honest leadership. He didn't treat the British people like they were too stupid to not realize it was a threat, and they would just instantly panic and crumble because of it. And I didn't want to talk about this much, but you can't ignore comments like this when it's something that's killed literally 60 times more people than 9/11. That's a lot of people affected.
More than that. Yeah, only 1,000 people died directly at 9/11. Couple thousand.
3,000.
3,000. You do the math there. It's more than 60 times now. They're about to hit 200,000. So, to me, this isn't shocking to hear these things. It's not like we didn't hear him play this down from the beginning. He's saying there's nothing to worry about. Saying things like, this is the Democrats' new hoax.
Yeah.
He played this down in front of the public, and we were okay with it. Not we as in me and Ashton, but we, like, in general, right? People were okay with that, thinking it wasn't real. I will come out and be honest. At first, I didn't think it was a threat. I thought it was the media just telling me to be worried. And then as more people get it, and I have people now who I know personally that are getting it, and then I have to go get tested and stuff like that because of people not being careful, I see it as real now, and I worry about it, and masks are important. But we have a president whose sole responsibility is to protect Americans, who, yes, some of these deaths are not on him. Some of these cases are not on him. He can't stop 100% of virus from coming because no country could stop it 100%. But no country in the world, unless China is lying like they want to say they were, and even so, China should not be our, comparison, has had this many cases and this many deaths. And it doesn't matter how big our country is, because Russia has about the same, has what, more population than us?
Yeah.
They,
Yeah.
they have at least the same, if not more population than us, and they have a ton less cases. And yes, their government's not democratic and it's not freedom. But sometimes, as much as I love my freedom, people have freedoms to do things that are stupid, like we're saying right now.
Yeah, I will say it's just so reckless by this president, because I've had personal interactions with people at work and in public where I've been asked, "Oh, you're a masker," or you I've had those eyeballs look at me like, "What are you doing wearing a mask around?" I I have to tell people constantly, "Hey, stay 6 feet around me," and they look at me like I'm the bad person. And the sad part is, I have a wife with asthma. I don't get the choice of not taking this seriously. I have to take this seriously. And it's sad that, you just look at the anniversary of 9/11 and you see a country united in its response after that tragedy. And we have a, different type of tragedy, but something that's so sad. In America as a whole, you have 40% of the country just refusing to not take it seriously. They it's any excuse in the book, and it's just sad. And I wish this would change a lot. We can talk about the political ramifications. I don't think this changes that 42%. Does it solidify the movement towards Biden by independents? I do. And I think this does make this difference. The biggest thing is it takes another week away from time Trump could be gaining in the polls, could be talking about rights, could be talking about the things he thinks suits his campaign. And, you know, I just think it's ironic, or it's some type of romantic twist of fate, that Bob Woodward, the guy who broke Watergate, would break these tapes. And did you know, Andy, he did like 16 interviews with Bob Woodward?
Wow.
Over like, I think he said he has like 90 minutes of interviews, and we've only heard like a minute.
Mm.
So
Mm.
you it's September and we've already gotten like 3 October surprises.
Yep.
So if it's going to be busy news week, guys. We don't try to talk about Trump all the time. It's kind of hard when it's a re-election campaign and it's literally Trump saying something, or something happening that's Andy, I don't know the word for it.
I know what you're saying, but I will have to say, though, Democratic, Republican, Independent, Socialist, I don't care what your party is. Look back at the last couple of presidents: Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. I had the last three. None of those three, Republican or Democratic, would have played this virus down at all. They would have brought this country together and would have unified them, because a virus is serious. Obama was in office during the Ebola outbreak, so he definitely would have been able to take care of it. George W. Bush handled the country after 9/11. He would have been able to rally this country together. Clinton didn't have to really suffer much of a thing after the Monica Lewinsky scandal, but I believe he would have believed science because he was huge with environmentalism.
I think the irony about it too, Andy, is, how he got a bump in the polls after this started, and it looked like it was a rallying around the flag effect. If he had taken this seriously, I honestly think he would probably be winning right now, or at least within a point or two of Biden, because you've seen that in some red states where the governors have performed well, like in Ohio. Mike DeWine's approval ratings are like very high, and you could have seen where, you know Trump acted seriously, prepared, he warned the country, and then he would have been kind of inoculated from some of the bad consequences of the virus. So it's a wasted opportunity.
Do I think that the Democrats are milking this out of the cow as much as they can?
Oh, yeah.
Towards, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Would you
yeah.
not? Like, as much as it's inhumane to do that, just think of like the political aspect of this. If you have a chance to like keep punching this man in the gut as much as you can because you have something on him that is very real and very effective, of course you're going to keep hitting it. Of course you're going to say this man did COVID or what. I mean, it's just political savviness as much as you want to say that. But the Democrats weren't lying about this virus. They just kind of got it handed them and was like, here's this gift here to win the White House.
Well, I mean, it's same thing with Trump and the riots. He tried to take advantage of a situation he
Yeah.
thought was politically in his favor.
He
And
tried to be Richard Nixon with the law and order candidate, but he has to understand something. He's not a candidate. He's the president. So you can't run on law and order when the country it doesn't have law and order right now.
And now you have him trying to do the same thing with COVID and his response saying, I'll have a great COVID response when his COVID response is the bad response. So, Andy, that's the Bob Woodward tapes. We'll see what else Bob Woodward has to say, and I'm sure it will be interesting. And, I will just note quickly about Bob Woodward. I think we both can agree he should not have held this for a book release
They always
before
do
the
that.
election, and that's to me.
It's
I
so,
hate that. It's so
who is like
it's Comey.
the man's not Comey.
Bolton.
Bolton. I was
Yeah.
thinking like Stone for some reason, but he did the same thing. I love the SNL sketch where they were doing like the impeachment trial you wish would happen, and they called like a Bolton to the stand. He's like, "Will you please tell us? You can buy my book." It's like these people. It's what Washington is. It's full of people that want to profit
It's
or
people
have power.
putting money over the country and things that, like, even if you didn't agree with the impeachment trial, you should have wanted all the evidence out there as much as possible.
If you can even call it a trial, it was really just
it wasn't a trial.
We're in a time where Washington's always been corrupt. I think a lot of Americans
every government's corrupt.
Can agree with that, but it's when you have evidence on a president that is so concrete and can honestly give Americans knowledge on stuff that they don't, so they're not speaking ignorantly, and you wait for money or for favors. I understand that's what you got to do in Washington, but like the average Americans are suffering, and we're never gonna have a country like we used to have if we don't get back to those ideals. But Ashton, we spent a lot of time on this, so let's move on to our third point of the day. We have social media like Twitter and Facebook. They're putting warnings in front of Trump's tweets, encouraging people to vote twice. This has always been something that Republicans like to joke about. I know Ted Cruz in 2016, when he went around campaigning, he would say, we're not Democrats, so only vote once. But if you could vote, but he's like, vote twice. But what I mean by that is get you and a friend. But they make jokes about voting twice because they know a lot of times Republicans don't vote in the mass quantities that Democrats do. That's always been the thing. If there's been sayings that if Democrats can vote, if more Democrats vote, or if voter turnout is high, Democrats usually win.
So let's be clear about this first to anyone listening. If you try to do this, it's a felony. In 99% of states, you will go to jail. Do not try to vote twice. And unlike what Trump says, it is not easy to try to do. And if you do it, you will almost certainly get arrested.
Also, on another side note of voting, an example is I had a friend in 2016. I was not of age in 2016. I am now in 2020. But he went and voted in 2016 because sometimes in South Carolina, we don't have the best, let's say, polling stations. So he got to vote. I did not vote, and I'm not going to say his name or anything for safety reasons, but don't go vote if you're not of age. If you're 17 or 16 listening to this, don't go vote. You'll have your chance next election, but you also have to be 18. So don't vote twice, and don't vote unless you are at legal age to do so.
Mm-hmm. No, I think this is an interesting story just on the merits of, if you want to talk about the tech side, whether Facebook and Twitter should be able to do this. I think yes, because it's a different form of presentation of information, and like you don't want the media when someone says something absolutely fake, like let's say we have two sons. I'm pretty sure you want CNN, Fox News, no matter what your point of view, to say, hey, that meteorologist that said there's two suns, yeah, he's kind of wrong.
So I know what you're saying, but are you the way you're making it sound is that you're comparing Twitter and Facebook to a news source? Are you saying that?
I'm saying it's a platform to give out information. I think it's their ethical obligation. They don't have to because they're a private company, but it's their ethical obligation to make sure if they have big public figures giving out like opinions or saying certain things that they make sure people know the correct information. Just like when Trump says, "Oh, go out and vote twice." You people need to know that's a felony. And if Trump's not going to say it, I think it's within their ethical obligation to tell people that.
I see what you're saying, and it should be in their ethical obligation, but the reality is it's not, because you're kind of in this gray area with what you want social media to be, because you don't want it to be considered a news source. But then let's say you want to compare it to a source like books and stuff like that, right? There's no one telling books what they can and cannot write. The publishing houses don't. If they want to write something as crazy as the sun's about to hit the moon and explode into a birthday cake, there's nothing stopping them from writing that book and publishing it. So you're kind of, I'm not saying you're wrong, but you're kind of putting Twitter and Facebook in this gray area, which they have enough power to stop wrong tweets, but then they should also be free speech. And it's kind of a hard place to be.
They still display the tweet.
Yes, but it's a tough place to be, because which are you going to be too far on one side or the other? Are you going to be too much not free speech in order to get the facts correct? Or are you going to be so out there you're going to be like a Reddit subreddit or something when everyone's a doctor and tells you that you're got cancer?
I think it's fine just because you can still see his tweet. He should be able to still tweet it, and he can reply to them, and he can comment and make his case back on Twitter why they are wrong, if they are.
I do have a personal grievance with Twitter. I do think, yes, but they are very much left centric when it comes to things you can and cannot say. We actually have an example of this, because as you guys know, we have our own channel Twitter. It's at the Mr. R Show. Go follow us. But we follow this guy called the Values Voter, and he was making a very good point about how Donald Trump's supporters claim to be pro-life but don't care about the COVID deaths. I retweeted and said good point and said what I thought. Yet, for some reason, within the following hours, it was just mysteriously deleted, and neither of us deleted it. That's Twitter censoring our content. And as much as you want to say, we didn't say anything wrong or anything bad. It was our personal belief, and they censored us. Now, if it would have been a pro-abortion tweet or pro-COVID tweet, we would have not had it deleted. So say what you want to say.
You don't know that.
You know good. Don't you sit there and tell me that if I said something about pro-abortion that it would be deleted.
I don't know what happened with the tweet. I will acknowledge that Twitter itself is left-leaning and Facebook is right-leaning.
It can't be this gray area that you want it to be if they are censoring certain beliefs as wrong when they can't be wrong.
But it's their platform.
See that?
I'm all for making laws where they have to acknowledge or they have to lay out what they are choosing, and they have to be completely transparent with how their guidelines work. I think that should be a federal law.
If you don't want social media to not have free speech, Twitter does not need to kind of promote itself as that kind of place where you can have your voice. Because if you want it to be a voice that is within a box, fine. But say it in the user agreement, clearly state that. But if you want to have your own opinions out there, but they're censoring you, we want to be able to know that so we can go somewhere else, because now it sounds like we're conspiracy theorists and, we're splurting things out there.
Well, I will say this. I agree Twitter needs to try to, as a private company, pull it back. I don't think it's the government's place to intervene directly with the government or the businesses' operations. I mean, you have examples of, like, on the right, you have Parler, which literally, when you sign up, suggests you just a bunch of right-wing stuff and just throws. It's like a worse right-wing version of Twitter, but even more restrictive with how it lets people talk. So, it's a problem, I think, in a lot of companies, and they need to get more transparency. I think that's the key, and try to be fair. And that's something the media has failed with, is being able to accurately push out a conservative point of view on top of a liberal point of view. A lot of mainstream media stuff. And that's why a lot of people on the right, I'm on the right, but why a lot of people on the right don't trust the media. It's because for 10, 15 years, they got so used to the media completely ignoring their point of view or talking down to it. And that's why they lost some credibility. And journalists, and like, I took some journalism classes. I know how hard of a profession it is, but people need to get better with trying to remove their point of view out of it. Fox News has a problem with this.
I think, sorry to butt in, but I think Fox News, they're very opportunist when it comes to a company because yes, they launched around the same time as the others, CNN and MSNBC and stuff like that. They knew good and well that all of them were a little bit left leaning. I wouldn't say all of them are liberals. So some are, some of the commentators are, but I wouldn't say the companies themselves are always pushing liberalism ideologies. But what Fox News does is it turns up its right-wing conservative values to up to 11 to play on these people, to get their views, to get their money. You look at Tucker Carlson, the man, these things he says, I sure hope he doesn't believe him because he sounds like an evil person when he's saying just shoot these people in the head.
He's a racist.
They do that on purpose. Like they turn up. There's only one good commentator on Fox that I like. He's gonna be the moderator for the first
Brett
debate.
Baer? Was it
The
Brett
the
Baer?
older guy with glasses that he interviewed
Oh,
Trump.
Chris Wallace.
Chris
Yeah,
Wallace.
yeah,
He's the
yeah.
only one I respect on Fox News.
Brett Baer is good too. I like Brett Baer. Fox has some good people, but my point bringing up what Fox News is, my problem with a lot of CNN has a few shows like this too, where they don't say it's an opinion show. It's like Kennedy is absolutely opinion. He is not a reporter. He's not an anchor. He is an opinion host.
That's really what all these CNN
80
isn't like that. Like it should be the news, but nowadays opinions get clicks.
Well, no. So here's the thing. Fox does have like 2 or 3 hours of hard news. Of course, some of it has a right lean, but overall, it's relatively well done. Like you get your Chris Wallace show on Sundays. You get Brett Baer for an hour. Like you have some parts of Fox that are honest and they do give you a fair view of the news. But the problem is when you have 15% good and then 85 or not, yeah, 85% just pure Tucker Carlson telling you a caravan's coming to your house to steal all your children, then that it kind of undoes everything else the network's doing. And same thing with CNN. I think CNN to a lesser degree, but still has some shows like Don Lemon that are, not told to be. They look like a regular news show, but they're an opinion show.
Yep. It's
And
just you gotta if you want hard fact news and what's going on, local news is your best bet. Local newspapers are even better. So watch your local news channels that you have on basic cable or Hulu or whatever you're watching on, and go pick up a newspaper because those, for the most part, are all about the news and exposing the truths about places. The biggest scandals of recent years really have been through the newspaper. It's just you see it on CNN because they pick it up from those papers, right? Washington Times, New York Times, stuff like that.
yep.
On top of, go watch. I know it's going to be boring as heck, but go watch C-SPAN once in a while. That's where government stuff goes down on C-SPAN. It's non-biased. Just this is what's happening. You see votes. You see your senators, your congressmen debating. Go watch C-SPAN. Don't just listen to Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity tell you how the Dems are ruining the country. Go see how they're ruining the country if you agree with that. Or go see how the Republicans are ruining the country. Go look for yourself.
Is it bad that I've actually known like times where I watch more than 3 hours of C-SPAN?
Probably. I think that if you've watched more than 20 minutes straight of C-SPAN, you are clinically insane.
Well, everyone, thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to try to get this podcast up on all the podcast websites. We're still setting that up to get it actual, podcasts on the apps and stuff. That way you can listen to it on your drive home and stuff like that. Talking about media by Sandy, I know a lot of people are looking down on the Rams, but we got to win tonight. I think me and you are just happy to be able to get this podcast up. We're going to be speeding these up, doing more of them as the election gets closer, and I'm sure in next week there's going to be 10 really, really crazy things to talk about.
Most likely. That's what it is during these election cycles. But guys, be safe out there. COVID is declining a little bit, but don't make that be an excuse to just go willy-nilly and go drinking all the time with, in the bars and the clubs and not wearing your mask. Still wear your mask, social distance when it is possible. Be safe. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys. Please like this and share and do whatever it is that will help us, because it helps us promote this podcast and our channel, everything in between. We like doing this. We hope you do too. Stay safe, guys, and we'll see you guys next week.